Hello and welcome to the Simple Parliamentary Procedure webinar. My name is Barb Gettleman and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar will be presented by Julie Lachey, former fraternity president from 2010 to 2014. Our goal tonight is for the chapter council advisor to have knowledge and experience related to CAPA organization and a basic understanding of parliamentary procedure as she works with the executive body of the chapter. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. This viewer window will display the presenter's screen when the webinar begins. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows a better view of the presentation. Take a moment to practice. There are a few features of the control panel that you should know. First, be familiar with the Raise Your Hand button. This button is located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to respond to a question being asked by the presenter. Click this button to raise your hand now. Clicking again will lower your hand. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question, type it into the question box. These may be questions related to the presentation or technical questions related to the GoToWebinar system. You may also be asked by the presenter this evening to type your ideas or responses here as part of an exercise during the webinar. Please send a quick note in your questions pane now. Questions may be submitted at any time. We will answer all questions at the conclusion of the webinar. During the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or even a survey. Please take the time to participate, as your input and ideas are valuable to the group. Be sure to stay attentive and to interact as much as possible during this webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. Try to avoid the distractions of responding to email, checking Facebook, instant messaging, or working on other tasks at your computer. If you need to step away for a moment, do not close the GoToWebinar window, as you will be required to log in again if you wish to rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation using your phone. Click the Use Telephone option in the audio pane of your control panel to view the conference call number. This webinar is being recorded, and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. At this time, I would now like to hand the virtual microphone to Julie Lachey. Julie?
Great, thanks Barb, and thanks for getting us started and reviewing the protocol for the webinar. I'm sure many of us may have already heard these instructions before, but it's always good to have a refresher. And just like it's always good to refresh our knowledge about parliamentary procedure. I even learned a couple of new things while writing this webinar, including how to do a webinar. This is the first time I have ever presented one. So thanks everyone for joining me this evening and for your support. At the end, if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint or script, please feel free to email me. So let's begin. Why can't we just run the meetings how we want to? We've all been to committee meetings. We get it. It's not that difficult, right? Pretty much common sense. Well, meetings aren't difficult if all the members are just like you. You're efficient. You know how to make a decision. As the new chair, you're saying to yourself, I got this. Now I can run the meeting like it should be run. But now you've also got new personalities at the table, newly elected officers, new opinions, a few quiet officers. Oh, that's good. That's always good. Well, maybe not. A couple of opinionated officers. No problem. I got this. Fast forward 30 minutes into your meeting and it's out of control. No decisions have been made. You're basically where you were when you first started the meeting, and a handful of members have taken over. Planning ahead and following the agenda are two basic solutions for a simple yet effective meeting. Again, Common sense, right? So why do meetings become too long, ineffective, frustrating, and at the end, not much accomplished? What gets in the way? Distractions by chance? I know you're all multitasking on your desktops. I've been on these webinars before. Checking your email, Facebook, Pinterest. You know, I've just discovered that one myself. Boy, that's a time-consuming activity. Good thing I didn't do it during council. But let's distract ourselves right now and get it out of our systems. Kind of like an icebreaker, which is always a good way to start your meeting. Let's first get a pulse on how much exposure you've had to parliamentary procedure. Did you attend the 2014 General Convention and witness the amendments to the fraternity documents being debated? Yes or no? And I think Barb gave you instructions on how to do that, and hopefully this is an easy poll to answer.
I have launched it, and it says that the poll is closed, and it did not pop up.
Okay. Well, that's all right. We won't worry about taking time, but I hopefully some of you already saw how the fraternity works in doing that, where people came up to the microphone, they were recognized by the chair, and we had a healthy debate going on, especially about that GPA requirement. So it was very educational, and really that was sort of a highlight. Well, it was a highlight of my president's term for those 2 years, really, honestly, because it showed the fraternity at its best. Members were able to express themselves, and important changes to our fraternity occurred with the approval of well-informed delegates. I was fortunate, of course, to have our expert parliamentarian, Ann Rempel, sitting right next to me. So let's go to the benefits of parliamentary procedure. And Barb, just to make sure, you've got that new slide up now, the benefits
Yes.
of parliamentary procedure? Wonderful. Okay, so what are the benefits? Here's a good snapshot of why we use parliamentary procedure. That framework for council or chapter meetings starts with that all-important agenda, and I can't emphasize that enough. The agenda represents the order of business. As a reminder, in the Chapter President's Leadership Guide, one of the responsibilities of the Chapter President is to set the agenda for chapter council and chapter meetings. That is her responsibility. It is your role as an advisor to guide chapter officers in understanding how to create an agenda and why they're so important. And keep in mind, all of these benefits and other things that we talk about tonight can pertain to committee meetings also. There are 17 chapter council officers, and most of them have committees, right? So these chapter council officers need to run their committee meetings using an agenda just like a council meeting. Again, agendas represent the order of business. And so that's why it's important that all council members know the benefits of parliamentary procedure, and any advisor who attends chapter meetings, because I know sometimes some of our chapters and the advisory boards rotate in on like a Monday night meeting, each take a turn going, but so that's why it's important that all advisors understand this. And as stated in the chapter bylaws, Article 11, this is clear, and it's in the fraternity bylaws as well. The rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, shall govern the chapter in all cases to which they are applicable and in which they are not inconsistent with these bylaws, the fraternity bylaws, standing rules, and policies. And that is in the model chapter bylaws. Hopefully, all chapters can put their hands on their archived copy of Robert's Rules. Well, just make sure it's the most current edition, and it's helpful to have a few simplified how-to books available. I actually personally have 3 concise, easy-to-use guides at my desk, and I'm often flipping back through the index of each of those books, trying to find my answer and seeing how they word it in each of those books, and it's very helpful. We know most driving laws, right? We have to take a test to renew our driver's license, so we know the law. The test asks specific questions, and you know, some of us even study for that test. With established parliamentary rules, we allow for the majority to rule, yet the process also allows for the minority to be heard. And like laws, these rules are important to know. Having these procedures and using them consistently ensures that the one with the loudest voice, the one who can articulate her emotional thoughts, that sort of bully that sometimes goes on, Well, that these members don't dictate the end results. During the revisions of chapter bylaws and standing rules, it's important to consider rules and procedures that will work for your chapter. Updated documents should reflect current governance, not what worked 10 years ago. So a good task after seeing this webinar is to make sure then that the chapter bylaws and standing rules are current and procedures and rules are clearly defined on how the chapter meetings are processed. Now, there may need to be amendments to clarify procedure. So ultimately, it is the chapter members who vote to approve these documents that contain the governing rules for their chapter. That's why it's so important attendance be enforced. Members need to exercise their right to vote. And then it's the members who must adhere to these governing documents. There's no excuse when, bottom line, they had the right to vote on the rules. So it's my understanding that this webinar invitation was sent to chapter council advisors specifically. So I'm gearing this webinar towards your role as the chapter council advisor in guiding the chapter president in managing chapter-related meetings. But just a little side note, these suggestions will also pertain to advisory board meetings. So if there are any advisory board chairmen listening in, we should always be modeling the way. So please run your advisory board meetings consistently too with an agenda. You know, I love this first bullet point, an organization of friendship, but with a governing structure. It sort of captures it all, doesn't it? Parliamentary procedure exists to facilitate the transaction of business and to promote cooperation and harmony. Fits right in with our sisterhood. So in using parliamentary law, we must always keep in mind a quorum must be present for the group to act. Only one question at a time can be considered at any given time, and no member can speak until recognized by the chair. Now, we'll get into these details a bit later, but again, these are sort of some of our basics here. A quorum, one question at a time, and no member can speak until recognized by the chair. And with that second bullet point, gosh, member participation is key to a successful chapter, right? Again, considering parliamentary procedure, we assume full and free discussion of every motion is considered a basic right of every member, and that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations, even that freshman who's been newly initiated. And of course, no one can speak a second time on the same question as long as another one wants to speak a first time. That way all are heard. And I love the wording in this last bullet. I actually found it in an old Kappa leadership guide. The ideals of Kappa Kappa Gamma, articulated in its mission, the preamble to the fraternity bylaws, and its standards, give depth and meaning to this democratic process. How true. You know, Kappas, we pledge responsibility to live up to the ideals and adhere to the standards of the fraternity. But along with that pledge is the responsibility to be involved in chapter activities. Having the ability to be heard at a meeting provides opportunities for self-growth to our members. So a well-planned agenda is a well-planned meeting, and parliamentary procedure starts right at the beginning. The chair sets the tone from the very start with her call to order, and by starting the meeting on time, regardless of who is in their seats, including the advisor, so please always be that role model by showing up on time. In a perfect setting, the chapter president is prepared and the agenda has been distributed ahead of time. The chapter marshal has a book of Robert's rules easily available, and now remember, it is actually the marshal who serves as the chapter parliamentarian. For those of you who were at convention, you saw this with our own parliamentarian who was sitting right next to me up at that front table on the stage, but as president, I led that meeting and discussions. Fraternity bylaws and standing rules, along with the chapter bylaws and standing rules, should be on the table. The chair takes control of the meeting by firmly stating, the meeting will now come to order. That was the sound of a gavel, in case you didn't know. A chair always needs one, so please make sure it's present at every meeting. That should be the marshal's responsibility to set that there by the president. The next order of business is yet one more way to set the tone for an effective meeting by the use of approving the agenda with parliamentary procedure. Now, the words approval of don't have to literally be on the agenda. I've just done this here for emphasis. Approving the agenda quickly starts the meeting off with a parliamentary procedure. Again, it sets the tone on how the meeting is going to be run. And it officially sets the order of business. The agenda's purpose is to ensure that spontaneous discussions don't monopolize the meeting. I'm assuming that a normal chapter council agenda would list each officer presenting information. Any discussion should be listed clearly on the agenda. So let's practice here for a minute. May I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? Well, we'll assume that Kathy said second. So the chair repeats the motion. It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussions? Or I could say, are you ready for the question? But that's a bit more tad formal. Now, here's where an amendment could be made in a simple manner. It's a chapter council meeting after all. A decision on the program topic for next month needs to be discussed, and the chair forgot to include it on our agenda. Oh dear, but no problem, we'll scribble it in. Certainly during a council meeting, this would be a perfect example of a friendly amendment. So the chair acknowledges that yes, during this meeting, the topic of the program for next month will be discussed under unfinished business. Everyone adds it to their agenda, and then the chair can simply say, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye. Opposed? Now remember, always ask for the negative vote, even if you know everyone at the table said aye. Well, except for the courtesy resolution at convention, but I digress. The agenda is approved as amended. So we didn't need to get into that motion to amend the original motion and have that amendment motion approved. We just did it just sort of right there. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended. It made it simple, but it was official. Next on the agenda, roll call. Again, practice this decorum in the chapter council setting. Don't do it silently. It's another parliamentary step in ensuring actually that a quorum is present. Approval of minutes. Another opportunity to practice simple parliamentary procedures. These should have been handed out ahead of time. That is key. Approval, therefore, should be quick and easy. Simple procedure says that a motion is not necessary unless there is a disagreement to the minutes. The chair could simply say, there being no corrections to the minutes of November's meeting, if there is no objection, the minutes are approved as printed. So we've just sort of skipped a couple of steps here and just sort of went on to then it was a housekeeping task. Now I wouldn't certainly recommend this for the agenda, because those in attendance need to take responsibility for what's happening here and now. But those minutes from last week are basically said and done. And as I said, they're a housekeeping task just to get these minutes officially archived. Officer reports. Now, this is where the chair can often lose control because of a dominant board member who feels her cause is the most important one that should be discussed at great length. A report should be where something needs to move forward, an issue requiring action. A motion gets presented, it's seconded, then there is a discussion moderated by the chair. This is a good tool to practice during officer training, how to do a discussion, alternating between positive and negative points. Practice that at your next officer training with something fun and easy, such as, should our mascot be a cat or a dog? And have people argue the points either way. But sort of show them then how that's done. But otherwise, we can all read report summaries. And that's why I often love those round-robin monthly updates from chapter council that some chapters are asked to do. Because there's no point having someone sit there at the table and read their entire report and taking up time when we're face-to-face. Really, there should be only the reason that they're discussing something is because it requires action or there needs something to be moved forward. But if there is a need to verbalize what an officer has been up to the past week, set a time limit on it. Now there's committee chairman reports, special committee reports, but again, really, these should only be necessary if a specific action is needed. Written summaries keep your board informed. They do not have to take the time up during the meeting. Don't let unfinished business be a catch-all for everything else that needs a decision. Robert's Rules of Order clarify that unfinished business should only include actually two types of items. something that was being considered but was interrupted at the previous meeting. So if that's the case and it's back on this agenda, the chair should have forwarded that documentation ahead of time so everyone's prepared again to discuss it this time around. Or unfinished business can be something that was postponed in the current meeting but not set as an order for a particular time slot. So it may not necessarily fall under an officer or committee report, but it does need discussing. Let's say maybe something administrative relating to the Office of Greek Life, or that program that we forgot to include on the agenda. We need to discuss the program. So that could fall under unfinished business. Unfinished business is not the place to rehash ideas that were supposed to have been pushed back to committee. Don't let a chapter officer get lazy and simply say no one was available to meet. So can we just have chapter council make the recommendation? I'm sure you've heard that a few times. The chair must stay firm and keep her meeting running on time. New business, down at the bottom of the slide, new business. Okay, according to Robert's rules, the presiding officer opens new business by declaring, new business is now in order. Very official sounding, isn't it? But it can definitely be a catch-all. The definition of new business is any proposal that any member may wish to present to the assembly, except items of business that must be presented under other divisions of the order of business. And I'll spell this out on another slide. Remember earlier we talked about parliamentary law being specific, not general. That certainly pertains here to new business. Here is where the chair needs to be specific and not allow new business to be a dumping ground. I personally have never been a fan of new business, except if it's to congratulate someone. The meeting's agenda represents that order of business. And so to make informed decisions, members need to know what that business is ahead of time and not sprung on them at the last minute. So under new business, let's give an example. The philanthropy chairman, who arrived late to the chapter council meeting and missed giving her report, speaks up and wants to get ideas for a possible service trip to Europe. I move that our fundraiser should be changed to support this effort. She's talking fast, doesn't wait for the second. She thinks she's official just by making the motion. It'll totally help with recruitment as we do a skit about our successes in Europe. Which country should we travel to? So here's our next poll. Which country should we travel to? Italy, France, Greece, or other? Let's see if the poll works this time around, because it'll be fun to know.
And it does. And ladies, you have 10 seconds to fill out your answer to the poll. And I see everyone, 48%, 55% have voted, 58. Let's get it up to 100%, ladies. 61%. 68%, 71%, 74%. Julie, here's our results as of right now. 42% says Italy, 4% says France, 29% Greece, 25% says other, and it's 77% of the vote in, and I'm going to close the poll.
All right. Okay, 25% other. All right, interesting. Well, the point here was that the philanthropy chair wanted to change the fundraiser, but we got sidetracked about all the sexy places we could travel to. But this discussion is not new business, ladies. Remember that definition. New business does not include items of business that must be presented under other divisions of the order of business. So again, that's why that well-defined and approved agenda is so important. Order of business is clearly defined. This should go to the philanthropy committee first. Young board members can get easily distracted by talking about Florence or the south of France. I've seen older members get a little distracted with sidebar conversations at the table. So here we are at the chapter council meeting, stuck while a handful of members share their recent travels and brag about their own service experience overseas. The rest of us at the table are getting upset that our time is being wasted, and gosh, next time I may not bother to show up if this is what is going to happen every week at a meeting. The chair needs to take immediate control and play tough guy, in a nice Kappa way, of course. She reminds the philanthropy chair that this discussion needs more time than what has been allotted on the agenda. no need to say that she's out of order, which she is, but we're all friends here. If she has to, the chair can quote Robert's rules about new business and what it should constitute. The chair sweetly asks for a committee report with stats and costs, and that the philanthropy chair should let her know when it's ready to be further considered by chapter council. If it gets traction within the committee setting, great. Then the members can ultimately vote on it, but it shouldn't take up time at a chapter council meeting. And let's see. I need to do my, there we go. Oops. All right. Announcements. At a council meeting, these should be mentioned ahead of time so that the chair can make sure there will be enough time allotted at the meeting. I've actually personally said no to some announcements on my conference call. Time's precious in the evening, and we could be going on and on about announcements. At a chapter meeting, I'd recommend that these are happy announcements, positives, before everyone leaves the room. Or maybe a suggestion, have a one-page printed list of announcements wrapped around a Hershey candy bar and hand them out at the end of the meeting. But this way, again, it keeps the meeting to a certain time frame and everybody gets out at the time that was said that the meeting would end. And speaking of ending, adjournment. To adjourn is actually considered a privileged motion. So the chair herself can't simply adjourn her own meeting without first asking for consideration. And, you know, I've actually been guilty of this one myself. The simple way to do this would be for the chair to say, if there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned. A chair cannot just slam the gavel and say meeting adjourned just because she thinks the meeting is over. It is the right of the members to determine the meeting's end. So where does a motion come from? We've reviewed the importance of an agenda, being prepared ahead of time with information in order to make a decision. But how did that chapter council officer get their information in the first place? As many of you know, the fraternity has a resolution committee at our membership meetings. There will be a resolutions committee at the upcoming regional meetings in 2015. This is where regional members can present ideas to fraternity council for consideration. The convention's resolution committee considers proposals and may present resolutions directly to the voting delegates at convention for consideration. So yes, a chapter council can come up with their own motions to move something forward to the chapter members, such as bylaws or standing rule amendments, but ideas that fall under a specific standing or special committee should be discussed in depth first by that officers committee, not the chapter council members. And this is how a leader can truly conduct an effective meeting. Council officers should not be bogged down in minutia during their council meeting. Ideas come from members. Ideas are then fleshed out by committee members who come to a consensus on how to proceed, or they can do their own motion. Then that chapter officer can present it to chapter council, who gives approval to present it to all of the chapter members for a final vote. And don't forget, the chapter survey plays a big role in all of this, and the final decisions on the chapter strategic goals are all part of that parliamentary procedure in facilitating chapter business, all while promoting cooperation and harmony. So again, just to reiterate the role that all members play in the governing of the chapter, and I think so often some of our members forget this, the handful of chapter council officers do all the work and they're not involving all of the members. Remember that slide at the start of our webinar about the benefits of parliamentary procedure? It provides a framework, places all members on an equal playing field. That is so important. Rules are the same for all members, and parliamentary procedure provides clarity. Think of those benefits while we look at these bullet points and the one on the next slide that we'll get to. Any member can present an idea or a problem that needs solving. A group of members flushes it out, council considers it, the chapter votes yay or nay to accept it. Our chapter governing framework works so well when the benefits of parliamentary procedure are considered. And I love the words that I've seen in a couple of documents, that it's courtesy and justice to all. And I think that, again, fits just perfectly with our sisterhood and governing structure of chapters. And so making a motion is actually a very serious business. There should be weight behind it. Much discussion and education should have already taken place. And this is crucial in running an effective meeting. I don't know if any of you remember that VCR videotape. Yes, it was actually a videotape that had to be played in the VCR machine, and it was postal mailed to all voting delegates ahead of the 2004 convention. It was about the upcoming amendments to the fraternity's bylaws and standing rules. The fraternity president was on the videotape talking about the proposed amendments to the fraternity documents. It was riveting. But the point is, time was taken to educate the voting delegates prior to the debate at the convention business meeting. And as you know, we always have those educational sessions, those bylaws forums where proposed amendments can be discussed at convention. So how many chapters truly take the time to educate their members ahead of a chapter meeting where an important motion will be presented? And so then we wonder, if they're not taking that time to fill in everybody, then why do the meetings start getting out of control? They go on, and random members are talking out of turn. And I guess this has obviously been a problem for a long time. Human nature, I suppose. And don't let anyone tell you it's only a woman's issue, because Thomas Jefferson seemed to have this problem as a chair as well. Now, how do we maintain order during all of this? We must always ensure that the basic principles of parliamentary procedure are inherent in how our meetings are conducted. And that's why I say practice at the chapter council meetings, practice in committee meetings, practice at the advisory board meetings. The basic principles are inherent, and it's the right of the individual to participate and the right of the minority to be heard. The chair should always repeat the motion after it's been seconded so that it is very clear what the discussion will be about and what exactly the members are voting on. Ultimately, it is the right of the majority that will rule, but how do we ensure that that minority is heard? And so to that point, to ensure order, a member may not speak until recognized by the chair. And, you know, I'd like to think that our chapters already get this during formal meetings. There is already decorum and protocol in place by the act of opening a CAPA formal meeting with ritual. But that same decorum should be in place during informal chapter meetings, and I think we lose it often there. What about at chapter council meetings? It's much more relaxed, of course, but the chair, again, must always keep this in mind to make sure all of her council members have a chance to participate. And, you know, one easy way to do this is that the chair could ask each chapter officer through a straw poll, just like we did a poll, to weigh in during a discussion that may not be ready for an official motion. It'll help those quiet members, those quiet officers, feel like they've been heard. I've personally gone around the table and asked each one, how are you feeling? Are you ready? Do you think we should move forward? And even if it's just a nod of the head, I've looked them straight in the eye to get their feeling and try to get a pulse on the situation. And that's okay to do at a smaller meeting setting. So point of order and principle of courtesy. I wish I'd had used point of order on some of my conference calls when I wasn't the leader, because it seemed whoever was the loudest with the best phone reception got heard. And, you know, I've never actually personally seen point of order used at convention. Maybe it happened before my time. If any of you have seen it actually used at convention, please send me an email. But point of order is a good one to practice and for all members to know that it exists. But hopefully, point of order doesn't have to be used, because ultimately it is the chair who needs to have control of her own meeting. So if she's prepared, the discussion should go more smoothly. Maybe, again, another time to practice that if there's going to be a tough issue that they're presenting, that chapter council is presenting to the chapter, the officers, certain officers, and the chapter president and the marshal can role play ahead of a meeting. I did this at a practice when I was treasurer and presenting a fee increase at convention, and we were ready for whatever might come up on the floor for debate. And I love this last one on this slide. Debate measures, not members. And that maybe is a good mantra to remember. This is a hard one for chapters, and especially for loss of membership votes. Although, you know, really ultimately a loss of membership is about violations of the governing document. measures that are listed in the governing document, measures which are clearly stated. So it's hard to argue the measures. But yes, the end result affects the status of a member. Again, it might be wise if this is a standards presentation for the standards committee to practice ahead of time to sort of see how it will go and make sure then the voice of the minority is heard as well. Incorrect phrases. And I think this is the one where I was sort of learning some too. Call for the question. Ahead of the actual vote, the chair presents the motion and then she says, "Are you ready for the question?" Now, "Are you ready for the question" is really just a parliamentary terminology that means the floor is now open for discussion. She could also say, "Is there any discussion?" So really the only response to "is there any discussion, are you ready for the question" would be to go to the microphone if you're in a big chapter meeting setting and be recognized by the chair, or otherwise sit silently until the chair repeats the motion and asks for ayes and then the nays. But if a debate is going on, then it would be appropriate to say, "I move to close debate." Moving to close a debate is an official motion which requires a vote. It's not just a demand. So you can't just say, "Call for the question," and no, that is a vote. So unfortunately, some think the phrase, "I call for the question," the chair can just jump to the vote, and this is not so. It is a motion that has to be voted on, and we actually use this at convention during the summer. So again, remember, "I move to close debate" requires a vote before and once it passes, then the chair goes straight to the motion that's being debated. Obviously, during a chapter council meeting, there's no need for that extra formality, certainly by saying just, "Are you ready for the question?" and then everybody votes. Another one, "so moved." The chair needs to repeat the motion even if it's a simple one. And this way, it's all members do have the right to know exactly what is being moved, because someone may be hesitant to raise their hand and say, "Wait, I'm a little confused. What were those words? Tell me again." During chapter council meetings or informal chapter meetings, the chair can use some shortcuts. The chair can save some time conducting routine business by obtaining unanimous consent, as long as she has included the words, "if there is no objection." So, I hope the summary provides talking points to share with your chapter officers as to why it's important to learn simple parliamentary procedures. We always hear about Robert's rules, we get scared off by them, but really they're just some basic ground rules that if we were all comfortable with, it would just help tremendously in our chapter settings. And it is so important that chapter members feel they have a voice. Meetings should not be a chore or frustrating to attend. They can be educational and effective. So really, that is the end of my webinar, because as I said, this was simple parliamentary procedure. We weren't getting into nuts and bolts. We do actually have another webinar on our archived website. I think it was from convention that goes into some more nitty-gritties. But this is the time maybe to ask some questions, and we have extra time for questions. Barb, do you want to open that up?
Yes. So ladies, now is your opportunity. Any questions on the information that Julie has shared with us this evening, please type right into your question pane. I do see some comments as far as lost audio, but audio was regained by one of you. But if any of you have questions, now is the time to submit. And these can be when you're sitting in on chapter council meetings or any specifics regarding the use of parliamentary procedure with the chapters that you support and mentor. I'm looking. I don't see anything. Oh, okay, we have one here. What do the rules say on the number for a quorum? And this comes from Jane McCurry. What do the rules say on the number for a quorum?
Yep, and that is a good question. And it's usually a quorum is the majority who are there who are eligible to vote and at the meeting attending.
Okay.
But quorum I always have to look up myself, and so I have all my papers here. Well, I'll use an example. Council has 8 council members, so the majority of 8 would be what, 5? Mm-hmm. I would need 5 for a quorum at my meeting. There was one time back in 2010, 2012, I only had 4 at the table because one was sick, 2 were sick actually, and one had to leave halfway through the meeting. So you take the number who are eligible to vote. That was the 8 of the council, and then you take that majority number, which was 5. That's the quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie.
And it's also quorum's also defined, I think, in the model chapter bylaws under Article 5 meeting. It says, Article 5, Section 4, quorum, a simple majority of the initiated chapter members shall constitute a quorum. And then it goes on to voting. A majority of the initiated chapter members present at the meeting and voting shall determine all issues. So it is defined in the chapter bylaws under Article 5.
Excellent. Any other questions, ladies? Now here's the opportunity to have a wonderful expert like Julie to answer any questions you may have.
You're so sweet, Barb.
Julie, I do not see any more questions at this time.
All right. Well, I know this was sort of short and sweet, but that was my intention. It wasn't supposed to be heavy duty and long, so you have an early evening. Thank you very much for joining me. And again, if you have questions, if you want a copy of the slides and the script, I'm happy to send them to you. So just send me an email and I'll get that off to you. So I appreciate you joining us. And Barb, thank you very much for helping me produce this. The webinar now is formally ended.
Well, thank you, Julie, for leading this session, and thank you, everyone, for your participation tonight. If you have questions or comments about tonight's topic, you may email Julie directly, and her email address is right up on the screen, kappa.travels@my.kkg.org. If you yourself would like to be more involved in Kappa's virtual training and webinar programs, we would love to have you join our producer team. Please contact Karen Holmes at Kappa headquarters for details. The benefits are excellent. The opportunity to support Kappa's webinar program and a front row seat at a great presentation is second to none. As we close the webinar this evening, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback will help us shape future webinar training events. If you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, do not hesitate to send an email to Karen Holmes at kholmes@kkg.org. Thank you again, ladies, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Good evening and good night.